we are joined now by our friend Mike Schaefer, Husker247. What's up, Schaefer?
Not a ton. Just stayed up late watching some Crown basketball to see Georgetown and Washington State duke it out. Other than that, I don't have a lot.
Hey, so
Pretty
it's
slow.
so, and I don't know how much Big East you get into. We've had these arguments almost all morning about how much Nebraska fans and Nebraska media pays attention to other conferences. Do you watch other conferences, Schaefer? Was last night kind of the first time you're getting a chance to get a feel for capping Georgetown?
Well, I live with a 3% Creighton fan. So there's occasionally Big East on the television. It's not by my choice, naturally, but it will end up there. And the thing that strikes me, and this is really stupid because obviously he coached there for a long time, but watching Georgetown last night just felt like I was watching one of Ed Cooley's Providence teams with just a different jersey on. Like they all kind of just looked similar, played similar, just crash, scrappy, hustle guys. Like his teams always feel the same. I always liked watching Providence Creighton games because their styles contrasted really heavily to me. And it was kind of like Providence would always make Creighton, who wants to play a prettier version of basketball, play in this back alley game. And so I watched a lot of Providence. And so Ed Cooley being the coach at Georgetown, like that was just the first thing that jumped out to me, is that he's taken that style to a place where it used to be a basketball mecca, and now it feels like an afterthought. And so beyond just Nebraska playing Georgetown next, I'm really intrigued to see what he can kind of do there in the Big East Conference. So I didn't really answer your question that much, and I hadn't watched any Washington State until the last time they had been in the NCAA tournament, which I think was just last year. They were like at 6 seed, or maybe it's 2 years ago they're 6 seed. They were pretty good at that point. Last night, the first time I had watched them all year.
Yeah,
I was surprised that they were dictating that game.
Yeah, seeing Georgetown score 85 kind of surprised me a little. But I told Ravi, and we shouldn't be surprised. You watch Georgetown, and they'll be the more talented team than Nebraska coming up. But it's just weird how they don't always play like that. So I was kind of just getting your thoughts because, I mean, they've got a lottery pick. They had a freshman of the year last year, although it was at an Ivy League school. Like, they're plenty capable. It's just seeing them score 85 caught my eye last night just because they don't always offensively look very efficient.
I can't remember the guy's name. Malik, help me out here. Malik Mack. I mean, he was on fire last night. I mean,
he is a really, really talented guy coming out of the Ivy League. I would tell Ravi all year, I'm like, I used to talk about this guy all the time when he's at Harvard, and it's just like he just hasn't been that guy. But when he's capable, Schaefer, like you saw that last night, he's plenty capable.
I don't know who on Nebraska can guard him consistently. Like, he's going to be a problem.
Apparently,
and then they crash rebounds, and that's going to be a problem. And I don't know that you can get away with playing. And I thought he played well in long spurts, but I don't know that you can get away playing Cale Jacobson as much as they did yesterday against this Georgetown team, because athletically they're in an entirely different class than where Arizona State was.
So were you real time when you're watching this, or were you thinking, oh, Coach Weber, good job adjusting with the small lineup, it's going to give you a chance? Or were you like, this feels like we're not taking this very serious? Like, real time, what were you thinking?
Oh, I definitely didn't think the second. I thought that he was matching up with the fact that once Phillips went out of the game, they didn't have to go big the rest of the game, and they were content to play small. I think Nebraska was always playing the long game in that Arizona State was down several starters. They had a short bench. They didn't want to get deep into that bench. I mean, I thought with probably, I don't know, I'd have to look back at the timestamp of when I sent a text in a group text, but I thought Arizona State's legs were starting to go in that second half. And I thought Nebraska was just, going to outrace them to the finish line. Like, I kind of feel like that was Nebraska's strategy for much of that game, is just, attack, and keep playing hard, because Arizona State's going to struggle to put together 40 minutes here. Keep yourself within striking distance, and then you're going to be able to run away with it. And that's effectively what they did, and they played better defense in the second half and forced those turnovers, ran out baskets, got easy baskets. Brice did his thing early in the first half with some critical shooting that Nebraska wasn't getting until Connor Essegian showed up in the second half. So I thought they took it seriously. I thought Nebraska's strategy was to wear out Arizona State, and I thought that was effective by the end of it.
So, Shafe, you mentioned Connor Siege in there, and I'm kind of curious what you're thinking in the moment as he starts to heat up in the second half. And I couldn't help but think back to his last performance that obviously didn't go well for Nebraska against Iowa. Just what are you processing as we kind of finally got to see the Connor Essegian, or a version of Connor Essegian that we sort of were always waiting for?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's been the guy who scored the points last night before. I mean, he had the big game against Penn State. It just unfortunately didn't matter because Nebraska fell in a giant hole and could not climb out of it. But he's talented. Like, there's no question that he can help your basketball team. The issue has been that in situations where Nebraska needs that critical three-pointer, the Ohio State game comes to mind. He made a couple of those. But then obviously you have the Michigan example. You have a couple other ones, throughout the back half of this season. I'll be interested what he looks like with a different version of Nebraska basketball next year with Rink Mast involved. If that helps him out a little bit, that there's another shooter on the outside that can do that. But I also think you're going to lose a lot without having Brice and Jawan too. So I am very interested what they can do for Connor Essegian. I have no doubt that Fred Hoiberg can create the shots for him. It's just if he can find the consistency to knock down ones. And then more than that, if he can hit big shots late in games. And he turned it on late yesterday, and hopefully he has a great performance the rest of the week, against Georgetown. If they win, continues on, carries it into next year. He's going to be a critical player for Nebraska.
How impressed, or what I guess I have to go back to what your initial thoughts were, that Brice seemed to be so dialed from the jump, given kind of what he's accomplished and where he is in his career, and then playing in the Crown. Like, what were your thoughts about what you thought you would get versus the guy we saw come out and play well last night?
Brice doesn't strike me as someone who's just going to come out and say a lot. Like, I think he's by nature a relatively quiet guy, maybe more introverted. But I think he clearly cares a ton about Nebraska. He clearly cares a ton about being competitive. I think if you were to pick up an object and there's two of them and you have a contest to see which one of you can throw it further, he's going to try, because that's the kind of, he's just competitive, And so if you put a game of basketball and he can play in it, he's going to give you what he's got. And I just think that's who he is. And I think he really cares about leaving Nebraska in as good of a spot as he can. I think it really hurt those guys that he and Jawan came back to make the tournament. They knew what it meant to Nebraska when they made it the year before. They wanted to be the ones to do it. I mean, it's the same thing we talked about Keisei Tominaga. Like, the guys that stick around for a couple years and they get that in them, that we can be part of the group that finally does this. And then when you don't, like, that's got to be really hard. But he's a competitive guy. He wanted to play. He wants to finish his career out the right way. I think at Charlotte, they went to the CBI finals. Is that right? And then he's in the NCAA tournament last year, and now he's in the Crown. Like, this is a guy that he played his best basketball at the end of his Charlotte career in the CBI, and leading up to that, he played his best basketball at the end of last season, helping Nebraska get to the tournament, and how well he played in the Big Ten. And then in the tournament game, he's playing his best basketball, I suspect, again here in the Crown, because that's just who he is. Like, he's a competitor. Chips are down. He's going to compete. And he also, I think, wanted to remove that Iowa game. And that's the other thing. I mean, that was as bad a performance as he's had all year, and you want to move on from that. I thought he came out and he looked like someone who really had a lot that he wanted to prove. And like I said on Twitter, it's also, we only get so many more games seeing that jump shot. That guy's about as good of a jump shooter as I've been fortunate enough to watch at Nebraska.
One of the things that I love, that I think he's gotten so good at, is keeping his dribble and being crafty with the ball screens. They'll even reset it for him, and he knows when that thing is going up. It is It is a pretty thing to watch for him to play that little two-man game where he can get his shot off because he doesn't need a ton of space.
Yeah, and the other thing that he did last night, and I'm jumping around a little bit here, I thought he was facilitating really well. And
Yeah,
Nebraska was
without
not
Ravi, right?
receiving the ball. Like he had an incredible bounce pass to Andrew Morgan.
Oh,
that
and
I think
kicked it out of bounds.
Yeah, just shocked the heck out
How
of
about the
Morgan.
one
Like he
that
had no
left
idea.
for him?
Yeah. Well, and then he sets him up for an even easier one, and then Morgan can't take the ball with him. And so I thought you want to talk about crafty. I thought we saw some of the best passes from Brice feeding people. And then you go look and they got no points on either one of those. It should have been an easy 2 layups. I was pretty disappointed in Andrew Morgan on both of those situations.